Well, good afternoon, Maverick traders. Currency recap time. Joe with you here on a Thursday. It's the 4th of September. You guys know how this works, so take responsibility. Let's take a look at the meaningful news of the day and some of this stuff technically, and if I've got some trades to share, I will do it.
All trades and analysis in this video are intended for professional traders only. This content does not constitute financial advice and is for educational purposes. This video is being released after a short delay due to Compliance Department review. Maverick members receive this content immediately as part of their daily trading resources. If you're ready to level up, consider joining Maverick Currencies. Our traders trade firm capital and keep 70 to 80% of profits. You bring the skill, we provide the backing. Let's get into today's market recap and see how the pros are trading the currency markets.
Moving into the market analysis, it was a little bit of a head scratcher for me personally. Well, let's just get started with the news of the day. So the U.S. markets did push higher today with weaker economic data. Now, I imagine that's just going to favor a September rate cut. We know that the equity markets have kind of priced this in. When it comes to the economy, it's not a good thing, but the markets seem to like it. In fact, we had a pretty good surge into the end of the day as well. U.S. employment number as well tomorrow, non-farm payrolls out, so we'll see if that's going to have any sort of impact. But as far as the U.S. side goes, when it comes to equities, they're definitely reacting to economic news. Now, when I take a look at how we finished today, so the end's flat, the dollar with weakness coming and the expectations of a rate cut, the dollar's up. Actually, it was the strongest currency of the day, 0.3%. Franc up a little bit, euro and the pound doing a little bit pretty good, CAD's pretty flat, but then the Aussie and the Kiwi a little bit lower. So at first glance, outside of the yen, it's okay, well, it's a risk off day. But that is not the case. Let's keep going here. So the S&P put in about 0.83%. It's actually back up to the levels it was on Thursday. Boy, tomorrow, folks, we could test new highs. The world index up 0.71%. Crypto dropped. Usually I've seen a correlation with the S&P and crypto. So whenever there's a risk, whenever there's a surge in equities, U.S. equities, I've noticed that crypto usually participates. In this case, it hasn't. In fact, I have seen a divergence between the SPX and crypto as a group since August 14th. If you guys want to pull some charts, it's been interesting to see that the S&P keeps climbing, crypto keeps kind of bleeding a little bit lower. We'll see where that goes. Gold lower, oil lower, also showing that, okay, maybe that's kind of a risk-on move, but gold and oil just might be pulling back a little bit. So a couple of things pushing and pulling against each other that, at a glance, it's only one day, could be a little bit confusing. Bitcoin Cash, Ethereum, all of them down. You can see 1.44% all the way down to 3.5%. We'll take a look at those charts in a bit. But let's take a look at the overall chart itself on the S&P. So when we went to our holiday, we already had a day down, and we'd broken a high here. We had a little bit of a hiccup there with some news, but these markets seem to really come in and kind of buy themselves back. A little bit of a pullback here. Here's the Powell Summit announcement from Jackson Hole. Whatever catalyst you want to associate with whatever move is fine. I just follow the overall end result. And when I take a look at things like this, this whole surge is after a gap. It moved up. Here's a pullback. It didn't really take long to do so. Well, we're in the same situation. It gapped down. I talked about this to our Maverick traders, not currency traders, but our equity traders, about, hey, look, we gapped down. We were already falling down from Friday, but we put in a beautiful hammer candle, which is a reversal signal. And then, boy, we gapped up a little bit today. But, boy, that last surge that we saw at the end of the day was pretty powerful. Now, we talk a lot about, okay, well, we're getting end of the summer, we're getting to September, October. Statistically, they're the weakest months. I throw all that out because I think it just kind of leads. It tries to lead. It's sentiment that matters most. Whatever you feel or think, it's where the direction of this goes. Now, this one's pretty interesting because I didn't see much behind it. A little bit of a decrease here on volume doesn't mean that it's not bad. It doesn't mean that there's sentiment is still not to the bull side, but we'll have to see what happens when it gets to this level. And a lot of it has to do with the currencies. So let's just get into some of the economic news. Some of the things that had a positive effect on the S&P was the ADP non-farm employment down, lower than expected. The JOLTS job openings lower. Unemployment claims ticked up a little bit, not a lot, but we did have a services PMI that bounced up. The PMI numbers on manufacturing and services seem to be a little bit more volatile. The focus is pretty much going to be on employment, I think, moving forward. So we do still have the non-farm employment change, and I refer to this as just all employment numbers: employment, unemployment rate, things like that. So we'll see if that's going to add anything or to continue the move to the upside, which if these come in line or less, I don't see how the equity markets don't continue higher. So it's kind of crazy here because the U.S. equity markets are actually looking for bad news for rate cuts. But I would expect the U.S. dollar to actually get weaker on this, and it really didn't. So let's just take a look at our currency analysis and see actually what happened volatility-wise. So first off, let's take a look at the yen. You could see it was flat today. It just had a little bit of a bounce. It did that kind of in Wednesday, Thursday, and then it's just flatlined kind of sideways. It's still in a downtrend. I don't think it looks very strong. It still looks like it's within its overall downtrend. You can see the moving averages lower. It's having an anemic bounce. It's barely getting back up to resistance levels, rolling back over. The SAR did flip, but the RSI really didn't make it over 50. So I'm just going to keep it at kind of a negative 2 for now. If you guys want to go negative 1, that's fine. It could consolidate and break out, but if it rolls over, this is something that I'd like to be a little bit more bearish on. Now let's get to the US dollar because I wouldn't expect that to happen. I mean, this is bad news. Expectations of a September rate cut, and this thing just kind of shoots higher. So what has it done? It's just given us a higher low. In fact, if I take just the velocity score in general, you can see that we have a reverse head and shoulders on this. Let me draw this a little bit better there. So this is an equal bounce here, and it looks like it might be emerging, trying to break out of resistance. Now, since I've been talking, obviously there's a little bit of a red candle here, but the pullback on the RSI that bounced above the 50, flipping the SAR in this moving average, I really don't want to give it too much. So I'm going to give it a +1 here. So if this reverses and falls back down to this area, then it becomes out of favor. It becomes a 0, -1. I don't want to trade it. However, if this can actually break above this resistance level, which once again, it's got this reverse head and shoulders. If it does, then it becomes something that I can trade bullishly against something weaker. But I'm going to make it prove itself. I'm not going to sit here and try to guess just because these markets have been a little tumultuous as of late. So I pretty much kept it as a +1 just because of this higher pivot point right here. Let's move over to the franc. The franc just basically flat. Back and forth between the RSI right at the 50. Flip-flopping on the SARs, moving averages sideways. I don't know what to do with it, so I'm just going to keep it at a 0. Let's move over to the euro. It showed a little bit more strength. I actually like this pattern. I don't know how much follow-through we're going to get because it looks like it actually is breaking above that resistance level. So you can see there's support here. I like the move on the RSI above the 50. So the euro is actually my strongest as far as velocity today. I gave it a +2. Going over to the pound did show some strength today, up 0.25, 0.27, somewhere around there. But it's more of a bounce off of a lower low. So you can see it set this here, and it did consolidate a little bit. I might give it that, but until it gets back up above this range, I'm going to keep it at just a cautious area. I'm going to give it a +1 because I like what the RSI did. The moving average isn't there. I'm going to give it a +1, and primarily it's because it actually broke above this pivot point. So we'll see what it can do. It can consolidate, maybe turn itself into a 0. I did like how it moved above the RSI, but both the euro and the pound showing a little bit of strength today, at least velocity-wise. Take a look at the CAD. The CAD looked like it was going to break out. I did like this. I thought that was really cool the beginning of the week, but it just kind of fizzled out. It didn't really go anywhere. So if you had a trade on this that hit a target, that's great. But if not, it just came right back into a zone where it's just going to kind of go sideways. So I didn't want to punish it at all, but at the same time, I don't want to reward it. The RSI did fall below the 50, but it looks like it's trying to stay in the higher end of it. So I just moved it back down to a 0 for now. Really not interested in it. Taking a look at the risk on, here's the Aussie. Now the Aussie still looks like a bull pullback. This is one of my favorite currencies just because of what it's done as of late. Now, favorite currencies velocity-wise, folks. This RSI seems to stay in favor. It pulls back. Look at the shadows here. So I think this is kind of a bull pullback on the Aussie. I'd like to give it more than a +1. You could give it a +2, you could. I'm just going to stay +1 for now. But if this starts to emerge and shoot higher and we see a little bit of weakness in some of the other currencies and a move back to risk on, this is the first place I'm going to look. Now, if you take a look at the Kiwi, it's almost opposite. I just don't like it. It's just kind of out of favor. It doesn't seem to really, it looks like it wants to climb. I like this. I thought it was going to be a bounce above, it set a higher low. I thought it was going to break out, and it just fizzled out and kind of fell. And when it falls pretty fast. I mean, some of these candlesticks are pretty good. Doesn't seem like it's too strong versus the Aussie. So I'm just going to set it aside there. I actually kept it as a negative, and the reason being is because it did break a support level. It's a slightly lower move, and the RSI is actually below the 50 there. Now let's move over to the cryptos. The cryptos, folks, I said, I saw a lot of correlation with risk on. I saw a lot of correlation with, the S&P breaks out, the cryptos follow suit, but I haven't really seen much of that since about the 14th of August. If you guys want to pull a couple daily charts side by side, you'll kind of see that as well. It doesn't mean that they're falling apart or anything's really bad. It's just they're just not as I'd like to use the word ambitious as I'd seen them in the past. Now with Bitcoin itself, I don't really want to punish it, because it does have a good move to the upside. It looks like it's pivoting here, a level pivot on the RSI. This could roll over and fall, but where it sits right now, I'm just going to give it a 0 because with all cryptos, I do need to see a little bit more movement because they are just so volatile. So if it can start to climb back to this area here, +1, +2 starts to come back on the table. But right now, sure, we broke above this resistance, we pulled back, we pivoted, so I'm going to give you a 0. But until you can show me more, I'm just going to keep it as, hey, I'm not sure what they're doing right now. Taking a look at Bitcoin Cash, showing a little bit more strength. It pushed higher. It's out of resistance. You guys can see that it actually hit, back in August 22nd here. So, but it's pulling back. I do like the shadows that it's placing here. Nice level. It's trying to find a place to turn. So if it can turn and break out, I'll be a little bit more bullish. But I did give it a +1. I mean, this is a pretty good run, right? And the RSI is actually above that 50. Let's move over to Ethereum. Ethereum looks a little bit weaker, more of a consolidation. It could slide lower. I mean, if you take a look at basically the moving average, it is slightly moving lower. Flip-flop on the SAR. The RSI seems to, it spikes once or twice above that 50, but it's on the low side. I don't expect this to really fall apart because I know if all cryptos shoot up, this will go with it. However, it's definitely out of favor, so it was easy for me to keep it at a -1, at least for today's momentum. Let's check Litecoin as our last, and it's similar to Ethereum. It looks like it's trying to pivot. There is a slight movement above some support levels here. I mean, we could draw very anemic higher highs, but I'd like to see this RSI get above the 50, a little bit more positive momentum. This is going to be a bigger line in the sand for me. Cryptos move a lot, so I expect them to confirm a lot. But right now, I just kind of kept it, where it's at, to keep it at as a 0. But there's just not a bunch out there at all, folks, that is worth anything. So here's my velocity score, slightly higher, slightly lower. I mean, the euro actually showed some pretty good strength. I like that. So you could take a look at that against maybe the yen. The yen really didn't participate. It's just kind of drifting lower. But very curious on the dollar. Very curious on how the dollar, it moved higher in light of weaker economic numbers and the anticipation of a rate cut. But the dollar is just its own little animal right now. And then the cryptos, really not participating in some of the surges that I've seen in the S&P since mid-August. I don't like to project. It's one of my faux pas. I can't stand it. I just follow sentiment. But just be leery, be aware of when something goes one way and something else doesn't. It could give us a little bit of insight. So in conclusion, folks, I don't have any trades for you. I don't. Take a look at some things. Take a look at the cryptos against the S&P. Take a look at what the dollar's been doing when it comes to announcements that are actually bad economically for the United States. So there's kind of some head scratchers when things kind of push and pull. Now, there are trades. We can make up any trade you want. You can take a look at the euro and the yen. I think that might be a great trade there, or the pound and the Kiwi if you want to get a little bit tighter to a kind of a -1 +1. But I do believe you're kind of forcing it at this point. I need a day or so to kind of figure out what's really going on. So the U.S. markets did push higher as the U.S. dollar went up as well. Curious, we'll see. That can all change within a day or so. Crypto lower on today's session, showing a bit of a disconnect to the S&P. It used to correlate pretty good. Good surge in the S&P. Crypto was right behind it. But since around that mid-August, it hasn't really been participating in some of the surges on the S&P. So continue to play relative strength if you're going to trade. Proper position sizing as always. But guys, when it comes to opportunities, it's a little early yet. So if you're leery or a little uncertain like me, just kind of sit back and waiting another day doesn't hurt. So let's sit back and see what happens. All right, folks, thanks for joining me. Talk to you next time. Bye, everybody.